as we try to put what we've learned in the first session a little bit into practice into the second session. It's always useful to both Amy and I that when we learn something new, that we right away get the opportunity to practice that a little bit so that it's a little sticks better in my old brain, right? So not that you have old brains, but my brains. So what we're going to do in this lesson is we're actually going to take our lessons and we're going to TSTM them, right? So we're going to model that, how we do that. Amy will model one, I will model one, and then we'll go into breakout rooms and practice. And we're going to be asking ourselves 3 different questions as we think about our lessons. Our first question is, what skills are already included in this lesson, right? What can I build upon? Then thinking about what skills can be added, right? What can I add to this lesson? And then the third question will be, how will I get my students to demonstrate what the skills that we've been practicing, whether it be in a formal group product or just some way to show that they've mastered the new skill. So it could be an in product, it could be whatever assessment you're thinking about. So we'll think about those 3 questions as we go through a lesson. What skills are already here? What skills do I want to add? And how will my students show that to me at the end of the lesson? With those ideas in mind, Amy's going to start out with a lesson that hasn't had the opportunity to be TSTM'd, and she will walk through that, and she will do a think aloud as she goes through those 3 questions, and then I'll do the same thing. Okay, Amy, are you ready?
I'm ready.
All right, go for it.
Okay, so I have a plethora of lessons, for previous lessons that hadn't been TSTM'd yet, that I hadn't thought about pre-TSTM. So I'm just going to quick show you one. And when I say lesson, really I kind of mean a mini unit, sort of a subject that I have talked about several times. It's about gardening and farming, just because that a lot of my students either were farmers in their country, the vast majority, or maybe they have a garden now, something like that. So in April, May, it's always kind of a fun subject. Okay, so I'm just going to quickly show you some of the activities that we had done in this lesson, and then we're going to think about how might I change it now after TSTM. So let's see. I'm just going to share my screen. And since my video was a little fuzzy, can you guys tell me if this is clear? Okay, Diana's giving me thumbs up. So first, of course, vocabulary, English for the garden and farm. This is not everything that this is just a representative sort of example of what the kinds of things that we might show and talk about. What are the garden pole weeds? What is a weed? Dig. Okay, more pull, pick, right? So which verbs do you use for which things? And then something like this, plant. Plant by hand, plant with horses, plant with the tractor. Of course, what did you do in your country? What do we do here in the United States, etc. Okay, again, some more words. Plants baby plants in pots. That'll come up later. Then some grammar. To pull vegetables, I need gloves. To water the garden, I need a can or hose, whatever. Oh, okay. So just thinking about those sort of brief things in my previous class, I would say that might be 2 or 3 days worth, which is 3 hours, 2 to 3 hours, maybe slightly more, to talk about those things. There's much more vocabulary, make sentences, things like that, talk about what did you do in your country, etc., contrast it with what we do in the United States. So thinking about the skills that were included in this lesson, I'm actually going to go back and show you again the list of 9 skills. I think it's excuse me here. Okay, so if you can see those, here's a list of the 9 skills. The last one is self-awareness. I can't see them all 9 at once. Okay. Anyway, so these are the 9 skills, thinking about which of these are in this lesson. Maybe self-awareness, just thinking about what you do or what you did as opposed to what other people do or did. And potentially respecting differences in diversity, just because people had different backgrounds. Some people did not plant or harvest by hand or whatever, and some people did. And yeah. Okay. So those are kind of the ones that I'm thinking of most. Maybe some communication, but mostly those 2, I think. Okay, I'm gonna stop sharing again. So definitely I think there's some room for improvement in this lesson. So I was just thinking about it. What skills could I add? How can I TSTM this to make it, to give the students, again, more bang for their buck or more bang for their hour, more bang for their time. Yeah. So I was thinking, okay, I think I can definitely get more critical thinking in there. And I can definitely do more respecting of differences. And I can certainly, I think, get more communication skills necessary into that lesson. So in my small group in the previous session, I discussed a little bit about how if I want the students to learn and demonstrate certain skills by the end of the lesson or the unit, whatever, I need to provide the students with activities that require complex enough thinking or enough critical thinking that they have an opportunity to negotiate with each other and decide things and use problem solving skills and all of those things. If it's too simple, they don't even have the chance to use that kind of to need those skills that I actually want them to practice. Okay, so I want them to make decisions, and I want them to be able to share the results of those decisions and discussions with the group. So something that I added later, for example, I'm gonna go back to my screen share here. Excuse me. Okay, so post TSTM, I added this page to our materials packet that goes home with the students. Something so simple. Okay, I shamelessly stole this image off the internet. We're not publishing or selling it, right? Okay, so it's just a picture of 2 empty garden plots at home. Great. And 3 very simple questions. What should we grow? This is a group decision, right? What should we grow? Decide with another student. Specifically choose 5 things to grow. And then think about why. Why do you choose those 5 things to grow? Also in the unit, we had learned just some kind of garden vegetable vocabulary in case they didn't know some of those things. So they know cucumbers, peppers, tomatoes, blah, blah, blah. And then, will you plant seeds or baby plants? Again, those are words that we had talked about before, and why. So just simple addition, but that provided the students with something to discuss in a breakout room, in a group, again, without the teacher. I was able to just go and observe them. So they had to use yeah, they had to use these sort of negotiation and communication skills about I agree or I disagree, or saying, oh, I don't know, I think it's better to plant peppers, whatever. So this very simple addition, really, that's the kind of activity that gives them a chance to demonstrate skills that I want them to use. So that's one example. Again, after every group discussion, then I want them to think about how their group worked together and come back and talk about this. Did we work together? Did everyone talk? Did we ask questions? And that's kind of an important one. We ask questions because we practice those questions of what do you think? So if there's a student who's not talking in your group, you say, whatever, Vishnu, what do you think? So just making sure that they're held accountable to that as well, asking the other students the questions. Okay. Oh, sorry. I was going to say this is the slightly earlier version, and then this is a little bit of a tweaked version. Especially, I think number 1 and number 2 are the most important, especially number 1. Okay. So another thought that I had, I could add maybe a simple financial component, right? Because gardens take a little money. So if we can just add a little bit of financial literacy, maybe into that. So just thinking, okay, what ideas? How could I get a little bit of money in there? Okay. So for example, we did something similar to this in a different unit, in our Eating Healthy on a Budget unit. So let's say I give them another sheet of plants, baby plants, or seeds or tools, like a little spade, a little hand spade, or gloves, gardening gloves, whatever, and a price with them. Images. Images are great. And then tell them, for example, you have $80 to plant your garden, and you need all these things. The students have to work together in a group and decide. Let's say you have a group garden. What are you going to buy? What are you going to plant? What are you going to buy? And why? And they have to, right? Maybe they have different roles, and one person is a report back person, and they have to tell us, we chose these things because. So that's just to think aloud of how I can take, yes, Kate, for sure. Price at home versus growing it at home versus buying it in the store. And in my opinion, the flavor difference in the store tomatoes and your garden tomatoes, can you put a price on that? No, I think no. Anyway, so that's just sort of my think aloud. That's what I would do. If I could do that unit again now, I would add, well, we did add the image of the garden, but I would even take it one step farther, giving them more opportunity to, to discuss together.
Amy, you might have wanted to do this, but I'm curious if you could show us the 9 skills again, and I'm curious which, by adding those, what skills have you enhanced your lesson with?
Yeah, let me go back up here. Okay. So here's the 9 skills. You know what? I'm going to squish the image so I can fit it. There we go. Okay. Okay, right. So after my tweaks, my additions, I would say certainly they got more critical thinking in there when they made decisions about, I'm going to buy seeds versus plants, whatever, or what was the other one? Oh, right, deciding the 5 things they're going to put in their garden. Certainly critical thinking. I think, of course, communication, because they have to agree and disagree with each other in a polite way as they negotiate. You only get to plant 5 things in your garden. Which ones are you gonna? You have to come to a consensus as a group. By the way, that's another thing that I ran into, coming to a consensus as a group. My students had to learn that because I think they weren't used to that. So they would sometimes come back from the breakout rooms and they would say, okay, well, I chose these 5 things and she chose these 5 things. Oh, okay. And we had to say, okay, so let's do it. That's fine. That's good. I understand why you chose those things. Now let's try it again. And I want 2 people, 1 garden, 2 people, you have to decide together. Like you're making the same choices and get them to, okay, you really do have to work together, not just tell each other what you chose. Anyway, so that's something that happened in my class. Okay, so sorry, critical thinking and communication, certainly. I think always when you're negotiating meaning, respecting differences and diversity, you get a lot of practice with that. Because you, you have no choice but to respect your partner's differences, their different opinions about what to plant in the garden or whatever. This one likes hot peppers and you don't. Well, gosh, how important is that? Yeah, so I would say those are the 3 things that were added, or they certainly got a lot more practice in those things with the changes. Yeah. What do you think, Laura? You see those things?
Yeah, definitely. I see those things. And I see you have some comments in the chat too.
Okay.
Yeah, and Heather pointing out how challenging it is for the students to understand it's a consensus thing. And I would think as a teacher, I might try to be creative about the scenario I'm giving them. And I think that could require creativity, like to say, if you all worked at Natural Beauty, or if you all were putting a garden next to the school, and it's that will be a garden for the students. So those hypotheticals that are putting them into a situation where they normally wouldn't need to have consensus. They might have to have consensus with their own family about what they plant in a garden. So I can see how that can be challenging.
Okay, Heather asked a question, would consensus be part of interpersonal skills? I have my TSTM binder here with me. Yeah, that's a good question. I don't know, Diana, I'm just quickly looking up. For me, sometimes the communication and interpersonal skills.
So I quick looked it up too when I saw that question. Interpersonal skills is the ability to work as team, not necessarily the outcome, but being able to have different roles. Like you're the leader, you're the recorder, you're the person that's going to report back out, and then to present those ideas and to take ownership in that leadership. So that's that interpersonal skills. Consensus, I think, would still come back into your ability to negotiate, if it was how I interpret the skill.
Yeah, they do list consensus building in
And
skills.
do they? Okay. See, I
Yeah. But of course, as ESL teachers, so much of what we're working on is that as well. So that's a little bit more like soft skills, right? But do they even have the language to politely say their opinion in order to build consensus, right? I mean, students, this is intermediate level, right? NRS levels 4 and 5. And they still, if they don't agree with something, their tendency is just to say no. Oh boy, that's not going to serve them well at their job, you know? So that's why this sort of language of, oh, I don't know, I think blah, 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 or maybe it's better if, you know, their instinct is just to kind of go the easier route and just say no. Well, that's a word that we try not to use in this, you know, in English or in this culture. So that's the communication, having the English in order to be able to.
Yeah, I think when you break out consensus, how to build the consensus is interpersonal. The product of the consensus falls differently, but to build a consensus, you need that interpersonal skills. Being able to agree politely. Yeah. So they kind of intertwine with each other. I find.
Yeah. Wow. So that is, yeah, that's all I have to share. If anyone else has any questions, otherwise we can go to Diana.
So
Amy, you had a question there before Diana maybe, and it was, is the addition of those 4 questions both an extension to include more skills or more of an assessment of learning?
Oh, look at that way there. Sorry, John. Okay, the addition of this question.
You had added that piece with 2 plots in the garden, and I didn't know if that was your way to have a practice or to add additional skills, or if this was one of those formative assessments for them to demonstrate their
Yeah,
mastery.
right. Good question, John. I would say for that unit, I would say it would be more an extension, I think, just on my part, so they get the chance to use. I've learned that if I don't continually keep the students using those skills and that kind of language, that of course they forget, right? If you don't use it, you lose it. Same for our students and for me as well. So I have to continually put those kinds of activities in there in order for them to not forget it. Or of course, as new students come in, I need to teach it again. I need to continually be teaching that. So yeah, I would use it as just another chance to show them, look, you're using these skills again. If you're new to this class, this is new for you.
Okay, and admittedly, I got a little confused. I know there's some back and forth in the intertwining. Is this communication? Is this interpersonal? That's the negotiation piece. Right, the negotiation as respecting differences, or as navigating systems, or as communication or critical thinking, or as interpersonal. That's what it was, right?
Yeah, right.
Building consensus as an interpersonal skill. So before you added that activity, there was really no chance within that lesson or module for interpersonal skill development. Is that fair?
Yes, I would say yes. Did they learned vocabulary? Yes. And they learned some grammar? Yes. And they learned to speak about it? Yes. But there wasn't that, the opportunity for that. Hardly at all. Yeah. So I think, John, specifically to your question, I think it's both. It is both an extension to include more skills and, of course, an assessment if the students have mastered what they've been taught before. Yeah. Thank you, Laura, for pointing that out.
Okay, I took a different lesson with my oral too, but I still found the same problems when I looked at mine originally. Let me show you what I've got. So I took a lesson where we talk about the seasons, where we talk about weather and time and our activities during the day. So it's quite a long, month-long project or unit that intertwines all of these new words together. And that's what I found when I looked at my documents. We had pictures, we learned things that were in the fall or like the seasons. We talked about what we liked and why we liked it. We talked about temperature words, how to say it's hot today or it's warm, knowing what warm is. We then used those words and tried to determine which words would go with the pictures. So we're still learning vocabulary. I took the words away and then we put them into sentence frames, thinking about today, tomorrow, and yesterday. We looked at forecast. We talked more language. So this is a month-long session, right? We talked about time. And we talked about our daily schedules. But within this lesson, there was no explicit skills taught other than their self-awareness of whether or not they knew the vocabulary or they could share the vocabulary with each other. They could ask each other the questions. Maybe they were practicing politely helping their partner if their partner got the wrong answer, or gave the wrong English. So not a lot of the TSTM skills were explicitly taught. So that was my first question, right? What skills are here in this lesson? I would have said none. So then I thought, well, what could I add? And I thought about critical thinking, of course, because I wanted them to do, I want them to listen to their peer about their country, right? We learned about the seasons. So I wanted them to be able to actually listen and to report back what their partner in the breakout room said. And that was the first step that had picking up on these listening skills, because then I wanted them to make a comparison and to think about, was my answer the same or different? So start taking that critical thinking, remembering what I heard, and then putting that into a critical thinking skill as same or different and why. We could do it with one, we could do it, they could go into different breakout rooms and survey all of their classmates. I could use it many different ways, then they could report back out. We could do it with everything, whether it be what seasons do you like, what's the weather today, what's your daily activities today, what are the same and the difference. With the temperature, we could use this exact same thought process to thinking about, is the weather the same in South Dakota as it is in your country, right? And then if they surveyed everyone, they could tell me who has the same weather if they lived in different countries. Like, oh, her weather is the same as the weather in my country, or making those comparisons, right? Then I wanted them to do more listening, thinking about a story, and then communicating and negotiating recalling the data of the story. This I find is very difficult for my students. If they see the story and they see the pictures, they'll recall how the sequence of the story, but I wanted to create a story where maybe they practice it in sequence and then gave them another page where the pictures to the story were out of sequence, and they had to negotiate together to put that story back in the right order. So something that they would have to do together. And that would, when I take that story and break it apart and put it out of order, and they have to put it back into order, that's a problem solving skill, right? They had to negotiate, they had to communicate, they had to have that. I would set up those interpersonal skills of who's going to lead it, who's going to report back, and of course, the self-awareness. But then I was just thinking, as Amy was talking, about this piece down here where we looked at temperature and forecast. And I thought, well, you know, I'm starting to ask my students to do some homework. And I know that it's difficult for them to navigate on their phones while we're having class together. But if I included a website in their packet and I asked them to go to the website and find the weather for tomorrow or find the weather for Friday, then they could report back to me. So that would be helping them to navigate the internet and the systems of checking out the weather. Maybe they have a weather app on their phone, right? So just helping them to see what they have and how to navigate the systems that are out there. This would be really helpful for them as winter sets in and they're starting to think about, will there be school for my children? Kind of critical thinking. Oh, it looks like it's going to blizzard tomorrow. Might be that the children won't have school. And what can I do to prepare in case they don't? So it could just bloom into many different skills that I could teach into it, depending upon what I wanted to do the time that I taught this lesson. So, and the final project would be what they report back to me. If they solved the question, did they find the weather? Whatever the skill is, I would have them have a small assessment. It's very unlikely at my level that I would have a large cumulative assessment. It would be one for seasons, one for temperature, one for activities during the day. So that's how I thought about this lesson and how I would maybe add some new skills. Maybe I wouldn't add them all at one time, because I didn't want to overwhelm my students, but give them an opportunity to practice new skills. Any questions?
Diana, can you, like Amy, revisit that list of skills and talk us through which skills you've now included by making that adaptation?
Sure, I added critical thinking, right? Because they're going to analyze the data and come back with an opinion from their analyzation. They're going to communicate with each other. I could add navigating systems if I choose to do that. Something small that they could do. Of course, interpersonal skills are added in, and problem solving. So there is a lot of skills added, and maybe a few of them will be explicitly taught, depending upon maybe what hadn't been taught in another lesson. Like my students already know this word, negotiation for communication, and they know problem solving. So I probably wouldn't explicitly teach those two, but I would probably bring up this critical thinking and what that means and how do we use it. So I'd have to determine which of those skills that I wanted to input into the lesson or the ones that I'd want to explicitly teach. Thank you for the question, Laura. I feel that increasing the skills in a lesson is by choice of you, the teacher, knowing what your students need, like which students are in my class at the time I'm going to reteach this lesson. What skills do they need, right? What skills do I see that they're not mm, they don't have mastery over. So
I have a question, and it can be for either of you, and not to be the one who's asking all the questions, but I feel curious about, for me, I wonder if it'd be easier to think about the end product or the assessment that would be more complex, and then work backwards to, oh, these are the skills that I've now included, versus I want them to work on communication skills or respecting differences. What is the end product or activity that will demonstrate that? How do you two feel about that as you have thought through TSTMing these lessons?
for me, I think about how I can, which skills I can add. And then I go, so I start here, like I'm thinking about the skills. And then I go like you suggested, Laura, and I go to the end and I think about how can they, or how would I want them to show mastery of those skills? Because then I might decide which skills are explicitly going to be taught. I might have a variety of great ideas, but they don't all navigate well to an end product for me, or they don't mesh together. So I kind of jump, for me, I kind of jump back and forth, because I think about my 9 skills, then I think about my end product, and then I go back and enhance those skills that fit that end product. That's how I do it. Amy, you might do it differently.
Yeah, I've been thinking about that. I'm not sure. It's like the chicken and the egg questions a little bit. I can't decide. I can't pick one of those two ways necessarily and just say that's how I do it. Maybe partly because I'm still kind of figuring this out myself too. I mean, we finished TSTM in April, May. I can't remember when we.
April, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, so I think maybe I'm still figuring out how I do it. I think I do some of both. I mean, this lesson, we have a lot of materials already created, right? We have a lot of materials already created, and I want to reuse some of that. Of course we will. We do. So in that sense, it's good to take what you have and add, you know, yeah, you want to add rigor, right? We've been talking for years about adding rigor. And this is just a way of adding rigor, I think, to our instruction. Yeah. But certainly, if you want them to be able to demonstrate a skills in a certain way, then you look at that and scaffold backwards from there, sort of.
Right. That's that backward design, which is one way of doing that. Yeah.
Yeah.
And you have a good comment from Heather in the chat too. I think her and maybe our brains are thinking alike. If I'm looking at a lesson I've already delivered, I'm kind of asking myself, what is a problem or project that this topic lends itself to? And then when I create that, then I feel like I can identify what skills are included. So I can see it both ways, but I don't know if Heather wants to say anything about her comment there.
Yeah.
She so does, I can tell. It's okay, we can pass, right?
Right. We learned that yesterday. We have the right to pass.
Heather's gonna use her right, exercise her right to pass. You don't have to.
No, I don't have anything to add to my comment.
Sure, no problem. Okay, so, gosh, what? We have half an hour left, is that right?
No, we have 15 minutes.
We have 15 minutes left.
Mhm.
Okay,
So we can go into.
all right, so we get to have breakout rooms so we can you get the chance to think about sort of your own situation, your own lessons, your own content that you teach in your setting, your students. And we're going to be thinking and talking together, and I will put these questions in the chat. So why don't I do
You want
that?
me to do that while you're talking?
Well, I think I can do it. Okay.
Oh, you got it. Woohoo.
Yeah. So these are the things that we're going to be talking about in the breakout rooms. So think of a recent lesson or unit or whatever, or an activity you taught. Just to, give a quick summary in your group. We don't have time to talk extensively or in too much detail, but just think about that and apply the 3 guiding questions, which are the 3 guiding questions are: what skills were included in this lesson that you just are thinking of, that you described? What skills could be added? And question 3, what could be a sort of a culminating group product or end product, group project, whatever your setting allows? How did I get the students to demonstrate these skills in the form of a sort of a culminating product or project at the end? If that helps guide your lesson. Okay, so that was wordy. I will review the 3 guiding questions. What skills were included in the lesson? What skills could be added? Potential end product that will help your students demonstrate those skills. That's clear.
You actually do have till 12:15. This session.
Oh, okay, good. So we're not in rushed.
No, you're not in a rush.
Good.
You have time. You have time.
Kind of what I thought. Whew.
I was
Thank
thinking,
you, Becky.
sorry. Thank you, Becky.
I double checked it on the agenda. We're good.
Okay. Great.
Okay, so how many rooms would you like, and for how long?
I think 2 rooms. What do you think, Diana?
Yeah. Okay.
Yep, 2 rooms. I think so.
Okay, so yeah, Diana and I will each be in, again, 1 room like before.
Yep.
Oh, yes, right. So just in the chat, question number 3, not the one that Diana just sent, but the one I sent before. Talking about scaffolding, I think in ESL, this is probably one of the, maybe potentially it's the number 1 sort of mistake that teachers have to learn by trial and error. Usually is to, if you don't give enough scaffolding, your students are not successful, and that's not their fault, that's our fault, right? If they can't be successful at what we ask them to do, that is our fault. It's never theirs. I went to a conference several years ago with Robin Schwartz. Some of you remember her. And she was like, guess what, teachers? It's always your fault. If the students can't do something, it's your fault. Wow, you're right. Yeah, that is totally true. Sometimes over the years, I've been tempted to just be like, these students, why can't they get it? It's not their fault. I have to adjust, right? I have to adjust what I'm expecting them to do, or just add more scaffolding in. So getting the students to do all these new skills, which may or may not be new to them, it requires a great deal of scaffolding, and in ESL that takes a great investment of time and energy. So just thinking and talking about that as you talk about your lessons. Okay, thank you.
Okay. How much time are we spending in the rooms?
Okay, we have till, let's, okay, if we have 10 minutes left at the end.
So about 15 minutes, a little more than 15 minutes.
Yeah, that
Okay.
sounds great. Thank you.
You're welcome. We can handle that. We'll do
I
that.
can do math just when I'm on the spot.
That's why I'm here, Amy.
Yeah.
Okay, here we go. let me, Diana, do you see the option just to join the other room or no? Oh, here, I can move you. There we go.
Okay, we're back. We're back in our big group. Yeah, we have till 12:15. Okay, so since we're all back together again, hopefully you had some good discussions in your group. We did in ours. There's always a lot to think about. Would anyone in either group like to share what you discussed in your groups? Just kind of share with the big group any takeaways, any highlights, anything new thoughts. Maybe we do need some classical music after all.
I think one thing I learned from Jennifer's share is the value of coaching students to elaborate on an argument as an interpersonal skill when they have a really valid point, but they're not getting buy-in from the classmates. So that was something that I liked from what Jennifer said in our group.
Thanks, Laura. Okay, so that's what, maybe we can take this in a different direction. I'm curious. I'm curious what, like, how do you guys feel about these TSTM skills or what you've heard this morning? It's been 2.5 hours, roughly, right? You've been hearing Diana and I talk about TSTM for 2.5 hours. What do you think about this? Do you think this is helpful? Do you feel overwhelmed? Does it seem a little overwhelming, or does it seem just, I'm interested in your thoughts and feelings about TSTM.
I like it. I think a lot of these things I was kind of already doing before without really knowing that I was applying these skills. But I think these are also really good to know, not just in the classroom, but because, as you said, they are so important for for the workforce. It's so important to know how to communicate, to be self-aware, to negotiate, to understand other cultures. So I think these are incredibly practical and good skills to know. And I think they're good things to incorporate in lessons.
You know, one of the things that I have been thinking about this morning is it does seem overwhelming at first, right? You have these 9 things, you have all of these considerations when you're trying to put them into lesson plans. But what I've really appreciated that both of you have done, Diana and Amy, is that you've talked about your own process in doing it in small pieces and taking, you know, a lesson in a unit at a time and making one change, and then thinking about, is there another change that I could make in the future? And I think that that helps to make it a little more accessible in my mind, because making those changes to our lesson plans is hard, and it's a big undertaking when you start to think about, oh, I've got to add all of these skills to all my lesson plans. No, you don't. You have to pick a skill and add a skill to a lesson plan and try it out and see how it goes and learn from whatever happens, good or bad, and then go on and work on another. And so I appreciate you sharing the process that you've used to implement in your own classrooms, because I think that's so valuable for us all to hear.
Thanks, Becky.
Yeah, I totally agree with that, because, you know, when I first saw that list, 9, they don't even fit on one computer screen. Oh my gosh, how am I going to do this? But then when you look at them, and as, you know, we got more information on it, I think we all realize that we do most of this stuff already. We just don't know that we're doing it. So now, you know, just to take like one at a time, because my students are lower levels, so I would not be able to use any of those, you know, the names of those skills, but just to make myself aware of like one skill at a time and consciously add that to my lesson plans. And that's totally doable. And I really appreciated how both of you showed how we can add that to our existing lesson plans. We don't have to reinvent the wheel. We can just tweak a few things and add a few things, and here we are. So I think that's, it's a really good skill set to have.
Yeah, and it's important to note also that even, the TSTM lessons that are in our TSTM binders, each lesson does not contain all the skills. Each lesson might have 3 or 4 of the 9 skills in it. So you are not expected to fit all 9 skills into every lesson that you do, or even every unit necessarily. But yeah, you can get them in somewhere else, but you don't have to put every skill into every lesson. So don't hold that expectations for yourself. Yeah. Well, I think that we've had a productive morning, and this was, yeah, I think it was a good sort of way for us to start thinking about how am I going to implement this thing into these techniques, whatever these skills, your own classroom, into your own lessons. And as I said before, you'll be hearing about TSTM also in the future at different T3 sessions throughout the year. So you won't just hear this once and then be done with it. We're going to keep bringing it up, so you'll get the chance to keep being reminded and learning more about it throughout the year. But I think we're done. Oh, yeah. Sorry, Diana.
Well, I was just going to say, I think Laura has mentioned before in the T3 that this huge binder that Amy and I received is out on links. Yeah. So if you want to go and look at the fine details, that each page holds, feel free to go out there and find that and to ask those clarifying questions yourself and looking into that document. So
yeah, and I should add
your own huge binder.
Yeah.
Yes, buy a huge binder.
Right. Also on the links website, they have videos. TSTM put out really good instructional videos for teachers about TSTM and how to implement some these skills and what it looks like. They actually show you some clips of ESL classrooms doing these lessons, doing these skills. So I think the videos are good. And those you can find on the links website. So I would recommend those. They're not super long either, so very doable.
And most likely we will be wrapping some of those into our future T3 sessions so that we can view that video and then discuss it together and support each other with thinking about how that applies to our own instruction. So feel free to jump on earlier, but if you're all interested, we can certainly make those group discussion opportunities.
Something to look forward to. Thank you all. And thanks, Amy and Diana, for a really rich learning experience this morning. Dwayne Loffman, you're our winner. Yay, Dwayne. So watch your email. You'll be getting a prize.
Oh,
and
thank you.
and we are done now for lunch break. Hopefully I will see some of you back at 1:15 for our STAR sessions this afternoon. Otherwise, have a great afternoon, and I'll see you tomorrow.
Thank you,
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Thanks, Amy and Diana. Thanks, Becky.
Thank you.